Liv, I've been doing this thing with my friends where each week we do our peak and pit of the week. So
Oh,
I'm going to
cute.
ask you yours, but I'll start
Oh,
with mine first. My pit of the week has been Kieran getting COVID because it's
oh,
meant that I've
yeah.
had to sleep. I mean, obviously, poor Kieran, but I've had to sleep on the blow up bed in lounge and I
Oh
have to
no.
walk around with a mask on because ain't no way I'm getting COVID again. Like,
Ain't no way. Ain't
I
nobody
don't
got
have
time for
time for
that.
it, babe. Don't I've got a
Nah,
podcast to record, like so
exactly. She's a busy
yeah,
woman.
it's actually not fun. I think my peak of the week is I actually took up swimming at a swimming club whilst in Australia.
Ooh,
So that was
fun.
actually pretty good because I've wanted to get back into it. Like if you're new to the pod, I used to be quite a competitive swimmer, but I haven't done it
Love
since being here
that.
because I couldn't find a squad that wasn't ocean swimming. Like I don't want to be swimming in the ocean, babe. I just want to be swimming in a pool.
Hell no.
So so yeah, I managed to find that and I've awakened my swimming muscles and I'm like really into it. So yeah.
Wow, I love that for you. I mean, don't get too
Yeah.
comfortable because you have to come back here soon.
I know, not too long
So
away.
don't make too many good friends
I'm
and
just
forget about
preparing
me.
for when I come back. So, what have your peaks and pits been of the week?
I'll start with my pit of the week, which is that I have had a recurring shoulder injury for like the longest time. And I
Oh,
started going to a physio and it got so much better and I haven't injured it for ages. But then this week it started playing up again. And it just stops me from doing all of my activities when my shoulders hurt
yeah.
because my activities are pole and calisthenics and I need my shoulders for both of these
Mm.
things. And then, my peak has to be obviously that I have found a cat and I will be picking her up very soon. She may or may not be in next week's episode. So you have to tune into
So
next week's episode if you
exciting.
want to potentially see Wilma. But yeah, that would be my peak. But I love that you and your friends do this. I just think that's such a cute little way to like spark conversation and also just find out
Yeah.
little things about like your friends' weeks. That is so cute. I feel like we should take that
Mm.
forward into our friendship.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that for us.
Yeah, for sure. We should. And also let us know your pit and peaks of the week in the comments
Hmm.
as well, because we always love reading your comments.
I want to
So,
read them. Yeah, 100%. Well, with that, let's give the listeners a few seconds to write that in the comments while we get into this week's episode of Overlooked. Welcome to the So Cultured podcast.
where we explore science and tech unfiltered.
We're your hosts, Liv and Taz, two girls who love STEM and spilling the tea.
Each season, we take on a new theme, whether it's busting conspiracy theories, celebrating women in STEM, or breaking down the science in your favourite sci-fi films.
And of course, in every episode, we spill the laboratory,
where we share your wildest stories from the world of science.
Let's get into this week's episode of So Cultured. He looked like any other man. He could hold a conversation, laugh at a joke, and tie his shoes. But the moment he turned his head and the moment your voice faded, it was gone. Everything. His name was Henry Molaison, patient HM, the man who, after a radical brain surgery, lost the ability to form new memories. For the rest of his life, he lived in a 20-second window of consciousness. Every room he entered, every face he saw was unfamiliar, and every conversation felt like the first. And yet, somehow, he could learn. He could trace shapes in a mirror with increasing precision. And his hands remembered what his mind could not. This made no sense until she came along. Dr. Brenda Milner, a quiet woman with a sharp gaze, working in a field where women were rarely seen, let alone heard. But she didn't flinch at HM's condition, she studied it. Brenda's discovery didn't just unlock the mystery of HM's mind, it opened the door to a new era. So this is the story of a woman who mapped memory by stepping into the mind of a man who had none.
Oh, I'm so excited. And the whole process of him turning his head away from you and obviously not seeing you and then him immediately forgetting and then looking back and not knowing who you are
Mhm.
is crazy. But yeah, I'm excited to hear about a story in the psychology field. I feel like we haven't had an episode on
Mhm.
neuroscience, psychology. So tell us more about Brenda and her background, like where we always usually start.
Yeah, so Brenda Langford, obviously that was her maiden name, was born on July 15th in 1918 in Manchester in England. And she was born to a music critic father and a music teacher mother. So their house was obviously filled with music, books, and also languages. Because by 6, Brenda was fluent in German and her mother also taught her French. But it was really the beauty and logic of mathematics that ultimately captivated Brenda. So, despite her parents' musical hopes, Brenda applied to Newnham College at Cambridge in 1936 to study mathematics, and she won a scholarship to do so. And if you remember, Rosalind Franklin also actually studied at Newnham College in Cambridge. So,
Mm.
this college had some great minds, which I just think is so cool. But she studied maths for a year, but after a year spent wrestling with equations and abstract theorems, Brenda really began to question her place. She still loved the structure of maths and like the clarity and the logic that came with it, but deep down she knew at Cambridge she was surrounded by future giants of the field of mathematics, and she kind of started to realize or feel like she wasn't going to be one of these great minds in this particular field. So she started to look for something else. And for her, philosophy kind of seemed like the next best fit because it was logical, analytical, reflective, quite similar to maths in that sense. And so she
Mm.
was really drawn to its big questions and also the timeless debates that just come with philosophy. But when she floated the idea to her tutors, they really didn't sugarcoat anything. And one of them actually said to her, "No one earns a living doing philosophy." It was a man's pursuit, yes, but also a luxury and not a profession. Brenda, they warned, would be wasting her future. And I actually kind of relate to this because I loved psychology when I was doing my A levels and I was really
Mm.
good at psychology. Like, sorry, I'm going to say I was so good at it. I got 98% in my exam. I loved it so much.
Whoa.
And I really wanted to, like, I debated switching my undergraduate degree to psychology, but
Mm.
my mum and my uncle had both studied like something in psychology, something
Mm.
related, and they were both like, no, it's not going to pay your bills, don't do it. So I didn't. So
Yeah, same
anyway.
as my that was the same as me, but I really liked art and design. And my mum was
Oh,
like, "Yeah,
interesting.
nah, you can stick with science, babe." And I was like, "Okay."
Savage.
That's not going to
Savage.
pay your bills. I feel like you have to
I
be
mean,
quite privileged to like really follow your
a
passions
100%.
as a
Same
job.
with like any sport as well. I always say this about sport is
Mm.
like, yeah, most people who like, not obviously every single person, but most people who make it in the sports world 100% are like privileged in,
Mm.
one way or another. But anyway, so here we have Brenda, a young woman at one of the most elite colleges in the whole world, caught between brilliance that she feels like she can't reach and then dreams that she's just feels like she's not supposed to chase. And this is kind of like the time in her life when someone offhandedly just mentioned psychology. And at the time, psychology was really considered a lesser academic subject in the UK. And it was kind of like lumped in with moral sciences. But for her, it seemed like a logical middle ground. And so she gave it a try. And she just felt like she instantly clicked with it. She loved it so much. And her course at Cambridge was taught by Oliver Zangwill, who was kind of biologically grounded in the field of psychology. And so his teachings were filled with a lot of neuroscience and physiology. And this foundation would shape her entire career.
Yeah, that's wild. I think it's wild to think that how close she was to potentially doing mathematics and going down a different path, and how much it came down to timing and other
Mm-hmm.
people's advice. Like, she explored this kind of new field. Some people were giving their two pence that it wasn't going to work out for her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I guess if someone hadn't mentioned psychology in passing, would we even know her name today? It's like the butterfly
Mm-hmm.
effect.
100% spoke about that on the simulation theory episode if you want to know anything more about it. But yeah, that is so true. But actually, just when it felt like Brenda was kind of going to get on the right track, the world actually turned upside down. We're back. We're back here again
We're
because
back.
Brenda's academic journey was interrupted by World War II. So, like many others, she was drafted into the war effort. And first, this was involving like developing aptitude tests to distinguish fighter from bomber pilots. And then she was working on radar display research, which sounds like just so random to us now. Obviously, that was the way of the time, you know. But this is
Mm.
the period in her life where she met Peter Milner, who was actually an electrical engineer, and they ended up getting married in 1944. And that same year, they sailed across the Atlantic to Montreal in Canada so Peter could work on Canada's early atomic research program. At the
Mm.
time, Brenda had literally just £5 in her pocket when she arrived. So she hoped to get a job at McGill, but she found that when she got there, like the psychology department had just kind of been gutted from the war. And so instead, she ended up getting a position teaching experimental psychology at the University of Montreal entirely in French. Because obviously, like I said earlier, her mother had taught her French, which I'm just like, all of these women are so talented. I say this every
I
episode, but I'm
know.
just like, I ain't shit. I'm
I
literally not
know.
shit.
It really
Just
makes you
insane.
think like how much you've achieved compared to people prior. Like, and languages for me is like a big thing because I don't know, like we were never pushed in school to learn a language at all.
Mm,
So I'm kind of like salty that I don't speak another language. Obviously, I could rectify that and learn another language now, but it's much easier to say than actually do it.
dude, 100%.
Maybe just watch this space, guys. Maybe my like next peak of the week will be that I've learned Italian or something. But
She's downloaded Duolingo.
well, yeah.
That would be
Apparently
the thing.
Duolingo's gone now, though. But yeah,
Has
she's
it?
downloaded
Oh.
Duolingo. She's fluent. Buongiorno. That's all I'm gonna say.
Buongiorno.
I added the English accent to make it
Bonjour, mate.
sound buongiorno. Maybe with like a bit of an
Hello.
Australian twang at the end. Buongiorno. Anyway, massive
Oh my
tangent, but
gosh.
back to Brenda. So she had to kind of divert away from psychology research. Did she ever make it back into psychology research, or was she just doing a few bits on the side?
Yeah, no, she did make it back into academia officially actually in 1950 because she enrolled in a PhD at McGill under a man named Donald Hebb, whose groundbreaking book at the time that was called The Organization of Behavior was being kind of like workshopped at weekly seminars. And it was kind of like those seminars that pulled her in. So she started going to them and then she was like, I want to do a PhD with this guy.
Mm,
And she realized pretty quickly that if she wanted to stay in academic life in North America, she needed a PhD to do so. But also, obviously, like I said, she was just obsessed. She loved these seminars and she was like, yeah, I want to work with this guy. So basically, she approached him one day and Heb agreed to supervise her. Cautiously, though, because women often kind of at that time would end up leaving academia to follow their husbands. And he kind of wanted reassurance that Brenda was going to be serious about like having an academic career. And of course, now we know that she was. But Heb kind of took her word for it and he arranged for her to work with Dr. Wilder Penfield at the Montreal Neurological Institute, where Penfield was pioneering epilepsy surgeries. So she began by studying tactile concept formation in the blind, which sounds confusing, but it basically means that she was researching how people when they're blind how they developed mental concepts like shapes or objects through touch
mm,
instead of vision. So in other words, she was kind of exploring how the brain builds an understanding of the world when used without using sight, and how someone might recognize the shape of a square or the form of an object just by feeling it with their hands, which I just think is so cool. And
mm,
so this was kind of like it was one of her early research projects, and something that at the time she probably thought that she would do forever. Because for me, for example, like I started in epigenetics, I'm still in epigenetics, and I just kind of assumed that that's going to be like what I'm doing forever. But that absolutely might not be the case. But that was kind of the case for Brenda. But this really changed when Heb asked her if she would like to work with Penfield's patients for her PhD. And of course, Brenda jumped at the chance.
That is so interesting. So she went from even her like what she's researching in blind people. That's so interesting. I have two
Mm-hmm.
blind uncles myself, and I always think like
Mm.
must be so weird to think about. I mean, they actually used to be able to see, so it's a bit different. But if you're born blind, I always think, don't they say like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you got it's the same as imagining you trying to look out of your elbow. That's essentially how they.
Oh my
It's not
gosh,
that
I've
they
never heard
see
that saying
black.
before, but
It's
yeah,
just yeah, they don't
yeah.
see black. It's just you are imagine looking out your elbow like you physically can't. So I always found that
Mm-hmm.
so interesting. But yeah, so she
Yeah.
went from studying like how people feel out of shapes to suddenly basically being put in front of these
Mm,
patients and like analyzing their brains. So that must be quite daunting, like being thrown in that kind of clinical work as a student.
yeah, 100%. I agree. Like, I had to do something similar for my job, my last job, and it was pretty petrifying. But
Mm.
for Brenda, this is really where it all, I guess, kind of like started because it was through Penfield's surgeries that Milner began documenting something strange, which was patients losing the ability to form new memories. Now, one of the first cases that she worked on was PB, a civil. So, like all of these patients, they just go by their initials, by the way. So, PB
Hmm.
initials. So, PB was a civil engineer who had previously undergone a left temporal neocortical resection in 1941, which, again, big words. But it basically means that surgeons took out part of the outer layer of his left temporal lobe. After this surgery, he returned 10 years later, basically saying, like, I keep having these seizures. They're so frequent, they're uncontrollable. And at the time, Dr. Penfield believed that the seizures were now coming from deeper within the brain. And so the solution he thought was to operate again. And this time, he removed the medial structures, including part of the hippocampus, in an attempt to stop the seizures for good. After this, Brenda tested him extensively, and it was really interesting because his IQ was high, his long-term memories were intact, so he could remember like things from his childhood or maybe people that he's known like his whole life, and also his attention span was quite good as well. But then she noticed something strange. He couldn't remember anything new. It was kind of like his mind was trapped in a loop, endlessly resetting every few minutes. And I just think this is the most chilling part about this story is that he actually knew because at one point he looked at Brenda and asked, "What have you people done to my memory?" Like that must be so scary. I just can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's literally something like out of a horror film, to be honest. And I also think like
100%.
wild that they were just doing brain surgery and just taking things away like willy-nilly. Like what? It's
Yeah, just like, oh
crazy.
yeah, we'll just take this chunk of your brain out. It's just insane.
Yeah.
But after PB came a patient known as FC, who had a one-stage left temporal lobectomy, which basically, again, big words, but it just means that surgeons removed a portion of the left temporal lobe of the brain all at once in one single surgery. And what they saw was the exact same result. And Brenda and Penfield started to suspect something. They wondered, what if these patients already had hidden damage on the other side of their brain, the side that wasn't operated on? Now, for anyone who doesn't know, we actually have two hippocampi, one on each side of the brain. So if one's already damaged and the surgeon then removes the other, that leaves you with obviously none. And without a functioning hippocampus, your brain simply cannot form new memories. Now, years later, when PB passed away, an autopsy actually confirmed this theory because his right hippocampus, the supposedly untouched one or the one that they didn't do any surgery on, was actually found to be severely atrophied. And that discovery was a game changer because it was the first real proof that the hippocampus is absolutely vital for making new memories.
Hmm. That's interesting. I didn't realize there was two hippocampi. I thought we just had one, but Yeah, that makes sense if there's like two on each side of the brain. But how does one side even become atrophied? How does that even happen?
So in this case, it was likely just from years of like the seizure activity. So just years of having like all of
Mm.
these different seizures, because the hippocampus is one of the most seizure prone areas of the brain, especially
Oh.
in temporal lobe epilepsy. And repeated seizure activity or just having repeated seizures can cause neuronal death, inflammation, and scarring, which basically just leads to atrophy. And if anybody doesn't know what
Mm.
atrophy is, it is basically just like the shrinkage and loss of function in the
Hmm.
hippocampus. Now, at this point, word of Brenda's work had started to spread, and that's when a neurosurgeon in Connecticut, Dr. William Scoville, reached out. So he'd just operated on a young man named Henry Molaison, who would go down in history as patient HM. HM had suffered from debilitating epilepsy, and in 1953, Scoville performed a drastic surgery, a bilateral medial temporal lobe resection. Basically, he removed parts of HM's hippocampus and also surrounding tissue on both sides of the brain. The good news from this surgery is that it did stop the seizures, so that worked. But the bad news was that HM could no longer form new memories, very similar to PB and FC. He became trapped in the present. Every conversation, every face, every day was literally just gone within moments. And as I said earlier, he could remember things from before the surgery, but anything new literally just vanished. So Brenda traveled to Hartford to examine him, and she spent days with him. But every time she walked into the room, he would literally look at her like they'd never met, because to him, that's how it felt. But then came something strange, because Brenda gave him a test, and it's a task where you trace a star by only looking in a mirror, which I just think is just like a so random. Like, who even comes up with that?
Mm.
Because I just feel like it's so awkward and it's like confusing, and I just imagine I would be so bad at it for like the first time. I
Mm.
think I would be bad at it in general, but I imagine it's a hard task basically. And the first time HM did it, he was bad at it, but she had him keep repeating this task again and again. And each time she found that he got better, even though he had no memory of ever doing it before. And even though he insisted every single time that it was his first time doing this task. So it's really interesting because his brain couldn't remember, but his hands were almost learning to get better at it with each time that he did
Mm.
it, because his movements got smoother and he was mastering the task without knowing that he'd ever done it before. And that's kind of when Brenda had a realization that actually changed neuroscience forever. So HM had lost his declarative memory, and this is the kind of memory that stores facts, names, and like life events. But his procedural memory, the kind that lets you learn skills and habits, was actually untouched. And that tiny detail was noticed by Brenda and it wasn't dismissed. And this is why she kept getting him to do it over and over again, because she was basically trying to prove that this was a thing. And this ended up becoming the first solid evidence that memory wasn't just one system, but it was made up of many different systems stored and processed in different parts of the brain. And honestly, that's kind of what made Brenda Milner an absolute genius, because she wasn't just recording results, she was really watching, thinking, and asking. And she, I feel like, saw meaning in things that others might have simply ignored. Because in a simple star tracing task, she found a clue to the architecture of human memory and sparked an entirely new field of cognitive neuroscience, which I could just never do, because I would just watch it and be like, okay, he's rubbish at this task. Let's move on and do something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I also think it's so interesting because I feel like we've touched on the different types of memory before, maybe
We
in the
have.
origins of consciousness, but I didn't know
Hmm.
that was all down to Brenda's work. So that's so,
There you
I
go.
mean, it's bad from us or bad from me because I did that episode that I didn't know it was due to Brenda, but it's also mad that his brain could still learn, but it couldn't remember learning. That is wild.
Yeah. Weird concept, isn't it? But
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's what kind of just like makes Brenda so exceptional, is because she had this like instinct almost for spotting patterns in what to other people just looks like noise. So after her work with HM, she didn't just stop at memory, and she expanded her research to study language, perception, and decision making, especially in patients with brain lesions in like different areas of the brain. And she compared people with damage to the frontal, temporal, and occipital lobes, and also across both hemispheres, almost like she was mapping out a user manual for the brain. And one of the things that she noticed was that patients with damage to the left frontal lobe weren't aphasic, meaning that they didn't lose language completely, but they just become unusually quiet. So she developed a test called the Firstone Word Fluency Task, where people have 5 minutes to list as many words as they can, starting with a specific letter. Do you think you'd be good at that test, by the way? Like, if I said to you, you've got 5 minutes,
No.
list all the words beginning with Z, like, how many do you
We've
think you
had a
could get?
discussion about this before about how you can speak really fast and I will speak really slow. So no, I would not be good at
But
that
I guess it's
test
like a
at all.
recall thing. Well, I don't know. Well, apparently,
Yeah.
healthy individuals can rattle off like dozens of words, but patients with left frontal damage actually really struggled. And it wasn't because they don't know the words, but it's because they were really struggling to like retrieve the words quickly. And it was a really
Mm.
subtle but important insight because this wasn't a general language problem, but it was a specific cognitive impairment which tied to a particular region of the brain. She also looked at patients with damage to the right frontal and temporal lobes and found that these patients tended to break rules on tasks or struggled with visual spatial memory, like remembering routes, locations, or shapes. And I feel like that's a bit of me because I cannot remember routes. Like, I'm a sat nav girly. Do you know what I mean? Always need that sat
See,
nav.
I'm better at the latter, but I think like recalling words like quickly is a no from me. Maybe I've just
Wow.
like consumed too much TikTok and have got major brain rot now, but yeah.
Brain rot from TikTok's real. I mean, put our brains
Yeah.
together then. It could be something special.
Yeah, it could. I mean,
But
we've made this podcast, so
there you go. But I guess that each group that she was studying revealed something new. And what Brenda was doing piece by piece was proving that the brain isn't just one big memory or language center, but it's really like a set of highly specialized regions, each being responsible for different aspects of how we think, remember, speak, and behave.
And you know what else I think is so clever is the fact that she's literally just figuring out how the brain works just by observation, like watching people. Like, I think
Mm,
we touched on origins of consciousness, that it wasn't until like a lot later where we had the tech to scan brains that we
yeah.
learned a bit more. But I think it's crazy that she's obviously doing that before all that technology.
Yeah, 100%. Another task that she didn't actually come up with this one, but she came across a task called the Wisconsin card sorting test, which was actually designed by a psychologist named David Grant. So people are given cards that can be sorted by color, shape, or number, but the rule keeps on changing without warning. And the trick is that no one tells you when it changes. So you just have to figure it out from feedback of the person who's like running the test. And Brenda kind of took this test and adapted it for patients who had undergone brain surgery. And she found out that patients with damage to a specific part of the frontal lobe called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is a part of the brain which is involved in flexible thinking and like decision making, um, really struggled with this particular task. So they would keep sorting the cards the same way over and over, even after it stopped working. And this is called perseveration, which is basically where you repeat a behavior even when you kind of like know you should be changing strategies. So like they know they need to do something else, but like their brain just keeps on doing the same thing. And before surgery, all of these patients were reported to have no problem with this kind of task before. And then after surgery, their brain could just literally not adapt at all. And there was no other group with different brain injuries that showed the same pattern or behavior in response to this task. And again, this was just another major breakthrough that she made because Brenda had shown that the frontal lobe wasn't just about personality, but it also had structure. And different regions control different parts of how we think and behave, like flexibility, planning, self control.
Yeah, honestly, as we've said on this podcast, one sleigh after another. But I think what I really
Preach.
want to know, Liv, is was she actually recognized for all this? It kind of alludes to the fact that she was recognized, but did people realize how big her work was? And this was like relatively recently. So is she still alive to like kind of reap the
Mhm.
reward of her research, because a lot of the people we've spoke about either have passed away before they were formally recognised and at the
Mm.
time they weren't, or we've obviously covered like Margaret Hamilton, who was very much recognised. But yeah, what was Brenda's case?
Yeah, so for Brenda, well, yes, basically to answer your question, she was recognized, and actually her legacy is massive. But obviously, I wanted to still include her in the series because it took quite a long time to get to that point. But I think it's a nice story to throw into the mix of the series because she, yes, did end up basically getting recognized. So Brenda's contributions to neuroscience are, some people say, literally impossible to overstate. That 1957 paper became one of the most cited neuroscience papers of all time. And she didn't
Yeah.
stop there because she went on to publish more than 25 studies just on the frontal lobe alone, many of them with hundreds and maybe even thousands of citations. So her work didn't just shape a few theories, but it really helped to build an entire field. So, cognitive neuroscience, as we know it today, literally owes a huge debt to her research. And yes, she was recognized. She receives all kinds of awards: the Gardner Award, the Donald Hebb Distinguished Contribution Award, the NAS Award in Neuroscience, and she was even made a Companion of the Order of Canada. But probably the most powerful thing is that in 2007, Brenda used her own money to establish the Brenda Milner Foundation, which is a fund basically dedicated to supporting postdocs in cognitive neuroscience. And even in her later years, she'd never stopped giving back. She was still showing up to the lab 3 days a week, well into her 90s, living proof that passion does literally not retire. She lived life on her own terms, and she was a real trailblazer in science and also in the way that she chose to be a woman in the world in general.
Oh my god, such icon. Honestly, every single woman in the series that we've done, I'm just like left kind of speechless after talking about them, because I'm just like,
100%.
what a like fiercely
Slay.
independent woman. Like, and I feel that's such a common theme with women in STEM. Like, we are fiercely independent. Like, maybe sometimes
Yeah.
to our detriment, but yeah, I just love that, and I love kind of like seeing the legacy that they've left for other women in STEM. So yeah, thanks so much, Liv. I really enjoyed this
Yeah.
episode, and I can't wait to continue on for the next two episodes to learn about some new women in STEM.
Two
But for
amazing, yes.
now, we are going to move on to our laboratory, and this week we are doing our What Would You Do
What would you
If
do if?
section.
Let's get
So
into it.
let's get into it.
But I'm worth it, 'cause I'll slip into your dreams tonight. So give me your
Okay, let's get straight into this week's What Would You Do Ifs, because the first one is cracking me up because I can fully imagine someone doing this, and I'm
Oh
getting
no.
true story vibes from this person as well. So it says, what would you do if you found out someone in your lab was tracking your hours and reporting it to your PI? Do you know what I mean? Like, someone has
What?
100% done this.
Yeah, I think so. It's giving petty lab manager.
Yeah, like wants to be the lab teacher, wants a promotion, wants their postdoc contract extended, putting
Yeah.
in that work for the extension. 100%.
Yeah. And if it's like about, I don't know, master student, PhD student, it's coming from like a postdoc, it's probably like they're not contributing as much as they should be or something. Oh, I just think
Yeah,
that's
like, what
so
do you worry about me
petty.
for? Yeah, you're the one who has time to sit here and count up my hours. Like,
Yeah, and also from a postdoc perspective, right? Generally, we try and work 9 to 5 because that's our contracted hours, whereas a PhD student doesn't have contracted hours.
I
So
was
it's
literally thinking
like
this. Yeah.
it's like
What you
you
counting
could
up?
literally do one day that is 12 hours long, and then the next day, literally, you only have like 1 hour to do, like that you need to do work.
Yeah,
And
100%.
it's like, that is the luxury. I mean, we're assuming this is a PhD student, but that is the luxury of being a PhD student, is that you come in when you need to do work. You don't have to be
Yeah.
like in the lab 24/7. I think that's such a toxic perspective to have in the lab, and some people really do have it.
But even as a postdoc, like, I don't have contracted. I mean, I have a set amount of hours that I'm supposed to work a week, but I don't even have contracted hours. So I'm just like, do you know what? If I want to leave for half that in the middle of the day, I mean, I would
Mm.
say it's different for me because I don't really like work with other people, so I don't really have like my PI messaging me, or like I don't really have anyone to answer to. So if I want to go off in the middle of the day and then make up my hours later, best believe I am, because
But
this
I
is one of
also
the great
think
things about
that's,
academia is flexibility.
yeah, I think that's actually so normal because,
Yeah.
like, even from a lab perspective, like, there are some days where I'm literally there from like 8 a.m. until like 7 p.m. and don't take a lunch break. Best believe I'm taking half a day the next day.
Early
Like,
day
I'm not
go.
working those hours back up. Do you know what I mean? So,
100%.
like, who are you? Oh, no, no. It would really,
So
I
what
would also think if it's in that environment, how the hell are you tracking the hours that I'm doing? Because how do you
um
know that I didn't come in at the weekend? I might have come in at the weekend to set my cells up.
I
So I'm going to
think if
leave
they're tracking
early
your
on a
hours, they're
Monday.
also there on the weekend. Nah, they're also there on the weekend. If they're at the point where they're tracking your hours, they are there 24/7, I reckon.
It is usually the people who have this like toxic mindset of having to be in the lab every day, many, many hours. Like there are people out there like that, and it's just think we need to change the narrative, mate, because I don't think we should be working like that.
I agree. So what
Unless you
would I
want
do?
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would I do? Nothing, because my work's going to prove that I'm there doing the work that I need to do, and that's that.
Yeah,
Simple as
like
I'm going
at
to
the
do
end of the
nothing.
day, if you're getting your work done, I just think, right, from a like a supervisor perspective, if someone came up to me and was like, "Oh, this person like they're doing like not enough hours," I would just be like, firstly, who are you to tell me that? That's
Get
a
a grip.
little bit weird.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'll take it on board and maybe like keep an eye out myself. But ultimately, if I'm getting the deliverables that I want at a certain time, I don't really care. As long as you're delivering, I don't
Who
think you need to
cares?
worry about anything. If you are like not working and then you're missing like deadlines and you're not delivering, then maybe you should be like, oh, maybe people are watching me because I am missing these things. Then
Yeah.
maybe you should up your game. But otherwise,
Get a grip.
I just think it's a bit weird.
Get a
Yeah,
grip.
don't take it personally. I just think it's a reflection of them.
Let's move on to the next one. This one is funny, and I can also, again, see this happening. So it says, what would you do if someone accidentally CC'd you on an email trash talking your presentation? So imagine you spent all week prepping a presentation that you're going to give at work. You go and give the presentation, and then afterwards you get an email saying like, "Oh, I can't believe how shit that presentation was," or just something really stupid like that. Like, what would you do? That would be so
I don't know. I would
embarrassing.
be mortified, I think,
Yeah,
if
same.
someone did that to me. It's also giving true story. Like, if this is a true story, can you please let us know what you did? But
Oh my
yeah,
God,
what would I
please.
do in that situation?
I mean, again, it does depend on what they said. Like, how mean were they?
I think if I like had my big girl pants on, I would probably reply to the email and be like, thanks so much for your feedback, and kind of give like a rebuttal to like say if they like made comments about specific things, I would kind of back myself just to make them like so embarrassed that they've sent
Yeah.
this like shit talking email to me by accident. I would just reply being like, thanks for your feedback. Some of it wasn't very constructive, but based
Oh
on the
my God,
constructive
yes.
criticism points, I would say this,
Yeah.
and then just be like,
And that's why I'm saying it
Taz.
depends on what they said, because if they were like trying to argue about like anything that you said, then you could go back with like a rebuttal. But if they just said like, oh, what if they said, oh no, like the font was shit, or like the colors, right, just something really stupid like that.
Yeah, if it
What
was
would you
something
do
stupid
then?
like that, I'd be like, thanks for the feedback. Given it's not particularly constructive, I'm probably going to ignore it this
That would be
time.
so embarrassing for them.
Literally so embarrassing. Like,
That would be
or
so
just something along the
embarrassing.
lines of, I don't really think the text font takes away from the content of the presentation, but thanks for your unconstructive feedback. And then
Yeah,
just leave
something
it as
really
that. I would
sassy.
honestly send a sassy email back, I think, because that
I'm
is more
100%
rude.
sending a sassy email back.
Yeah.
100%.
Because
Like,
I
yeah, you're
want
gonna
you
know
to
that
be
you.
embarrassed that you sent that and
Yeah.
then you're shit
Yeah.
talking.
Have you
Also,
ever
interesting, it just
accidentally
shows that you're
CC'd?
not going to take shit.
100%. Have you ever accidentally CC'd someone in an email that you shouldn't have? Shouldn't have, I should say. Correct English.
I don't know, but I
I don't
have
think I
blind
have.
copied someone into an email before because I'm like, I want them to know that this person is treating me like shit. So I'm blind
Yeah, I've
copying
done that
in this
before.
person.
I've done that
And
before.
and when I've done it, I'm like, oh, I'm scared. Because I
I
don't know
have
what's
done that
going to
before.
happen.
The closest
Yeah.
I've got to this what would you do if is that I was chatting about my PI with another another lab friend in our like Slack channel. And
Mm.
then I was like sharing my screen and like my Slack channel was up
Oh
and I had
my
to quickly
God.
I don't think anyone saw it, but like my heart was racing. So like
Oh
I felt the
gosh.
fear momentarily. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
real. Like
yeah.
make sure this is why I now, we said this on a few episodes back. This is why I now close all of my windows because I am not being caught out because I was nearly caught that day. Nearly. And now I'm like close everything.
Yeah, I think I've been in a meeting before and someone was sharing their screen and I don't think they realized she was sharing like her whole desktop screen, not just like, you can share specific windows. And she was like slacking like she was meant to be paying attention. It was a serious meeting. And she was like heading it basically. And she was slacking this other woman like, what are you doing after work? Do you want to get a wine?
Oh
Like
my
all
god.
this sort of stuff. And I was like,
So
babes,
stupid
pay
embarrassing.
attention.
Oh my
But
god.
yeah.
Nah, I remember like during lockdown, like all of the Zoom mishaps when like people would be like not on, like didn't forget they would be on
Yeah.
mute, forget their camera was on. Like it was just a whole thing. It was like I was nervous to go to meetings because I was like, nah, who's gonna fuck up today? Is it gonna be me? Is it gonna be someone else? Like the fear is so real of like, is my mic on? Oh,
Also,
they
I've
were the
like
worst.
taken my laptop to my bed before and I've been like just like disheveled with the view that I'm not going to put my camera on. And then like I've never
Everyone's got
like the
cameras on.
cameras ever come on, but I'm always like, my God, if the camera came on right now, I would be like so exposed.
The amount of times I've been like just walking around my house, like my laptop will be like in the kitchen and I'm walking around my kitchen like deep cleaning my kitchen.
Or
And
just
then
like
like I'll
half
just like
naked.
have that fear. Yeah, literally. And then you just have that fear of like, oh my fucking god, what if my camera's on and like I'm unmuted and like everybody in the meeting's been like saying live, live.
No, literally, because I've like left my laptop and gone to the toilet, weed with the
Yeah.
door open, and come back, and I'm like, wait, what if I didn't put it on mute? Everyone's just heard me like piss in the toilet.
Yeah, or if you've got your AirPods in and then you're like, oh my god, what if like I've accidentally like
Oh
touched
my
them and like
gosh,
unmuted
yeah,
myself.
yeah,
The fear was so real. I mean, it's still real for me because sometimes I still do like online meetings, and like
yeah.
it's just a whole thing. It's a whole thing because I'm never paying attention. I'm not gonna lie. I'm always doing something I shouldn't be, which is why I now go in for the meetings because I can't be trusted. Honestly. Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny. That is so funny. Okay, moving on to the next. What would you do if? I feel like this one's quite deep and we need a laboratory about this because this is 100% personal. It says, what would you do if you hated your research and you still had 1 year ahead of you? Now, we can apply this to any job. What would you do if you hated your job, but you still got 1 year of your job left in you? Like you've still got 1 year left on your contract that you've got to do. For me, this is really dependent on like, what are we doing after? Why do we need to stay in the job? That's what we really need to do. Do we need to stay in this job? Because I don't think
Mm.
we do, but
Well,
maybe
if
we do.
I think it's different for a job, right? Like you can just leave. But if it's like research, like if it's the PhD and you've still got 1 year left, like you just have to endure it, unfortunately, and just get through. Reap the rewards of all your hard work. Like you got to get that PhD, babe.
Yeah, I agree. And I have actually been in a situation where, not like I've hated my research, but I'm just like in a thing where I'm like, I'm not loving this. But I was the same in
Mm.
kind of, if you want to stay in academia and like you want to stay vaguely in this field, like I agree. Sometimes it's better to just stick it out. It's only temporary, a year, unless you're in like a toxic environment or it's like really, really something that you absolutely hate and like it's taking a toll on your mental health. If it's none of those things, then I agree. Sometimes you just got to stick it out for the best for your CV, If it's like Taz says, you
Yeah.
need to finish your PhD, because like if it's a postdoc, like it's better to just finish the postdoc, unless
Yeah,
like you
and I
say you're really
think
unhappy.
obviously if you want to stay in academia as well, ultimately you kind of have to see it through, because at the end of it, hopefully you'll have papers that you can publish and things like that. And if
Mm-hmm.
you dip out early, you're either not going to get like first author or like or high up on the author list, and you'll just be like not an author at all or middle author. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like you might as well just stick it out for the year, reap the rewards, whether it's a PhD granted or papers, and
Mm-hmm.
then move on. But yeah, I do empathize
100%.
with you.
I feel like a lot of people have been in similar positions, because I also, do you know what, one thing I'll say about academia is whatever job they hire you for is not the fucking job you're going to be doing.
No.
It ain't the job you're going to be doing, let me tell you. Like, you're going to start that job and the data will not be available. They won't have a piece of equipment in the lab that you need. They won't have the funding to do the
Mm,
experiment you actually need to do. Like, you are never doing the job. You're always catfished by a job in academia, let me
yeah.
tell you.
And let me
Always.
tell you as well, if you see any, and I mean any, red flags in your interview process, this could be a tip for
Get
you once
out.
you finish this 1 year. If you see any red flags, do not take the job, because I
I
ignored all
agree.
the red flags. And now I'm like, why did I do that? But yeah.
Really? Oh my gosh. See, I was straight up lied to in my postdoc interview. I think I've told you this before. Like,
Mm,
really stupid white lies that they told me. And then I started the job and I was like, why did you lie about this? Like, it wasn't going to stop me from saying yes to the job anyway. Like, there was no reason for you to lie about this. Because sometimes they
yeah.
really just be selling you a whole dream. So, like,
Yeah.
sometimes the red flags aren't there because they're just selling you a whole dream. It's a whole catfish
Mm,
experience.
yeah. It is.
Academic positions they're going to catfish you every single fucking
Yeah.
time. So,
Maybe
I
don't
don't
stay in
even know how we ended up
academia.
talking about this. Maybe don't take it in academia. Maybe that's it. But this is the thing. It does depend on what you want to do. It really does, because,
Also, like,
yeah.
don't I would say if you don't like the current research you're doing, don't tar all research with the same brush, because I've definitely flipped between like different research projects, and I definitely like know where my passion lies now. So it can be like quite eye-opening on like what you actually really want to pursue research wise. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, don't let it taint your whole experience if you don't like this one area of research.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's a good point. Well, that rounds off the what would you do if section. And that was actually our
Hmm.
last what would you do if for the season. So you guys still have time to get in your laboratories for this season. So don't forget that you can find the link to submit your own laboratory in today's video or episode description. Remember that it is completely anonymous. We do not get any of your details. We just get your story. So go crazy,
Hmm.
go wild. Tell us the wildest story that you have, because we know that every single one of you listening right now has a story that you can share with us. If you do share, make sure you give us as many details as possible, because you guys know we love the details. Pictures, ages, hair color. We want all the details. Send it
We
all
want it
in.
all.
We will see you in episode 7 of Overlooked. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.